This is my fourth online meeting today, so.
Yes. Welcome, everyone. I see some new members joining us. Welcome. If you haven't as of yet, we would like you to rename, well, take your name, and beside your name, if you can edit it, to add the name of your club that you're with as well, please. And that way, again, it just allows for everyone to get to know who's here and which part of our district you're from. It's a wonderful way for us to connect and also help to just get to know each other a little more, because this is the new world where we're getting to know each other. Okay.
Just hi, Tracy, and welcome. I know came across my desk. Zoom is actually running a series of training seminars all next week. If you wanted to dive a little deeper into hosting meetings, hosting webinars, best practices.
Those on the district website group page, that would be fabulous, so that everyone has a chance to grab that information. Here, I'm just going to send a quick message. We've got one of our members is having trouble signing in that we need, so Jim, I'm just going to mute myself for a second while I send the information off here.
For those of you who are interested, the Zoom is having some mini seminars all next week. If you go to their website, if you're interested in running Zoom a bit better from your own location.
And for the people that have just joined us here in the last few minutes, if you can rename yourself with the Rotary Club that you're from, that would be great. And if you're not sure how to rename yourself, just click on Manage Participants on the toolbar, and it'll pull it up. I have a feeling everybody's getting much more used to Zoom nowadays.
I do have a question maybe before we start. If you purchase one license and you've got, say, 3 or 4 executives that want to use that particular Zoom package, how do you, would that work? Or do you have to purchase a package per executive?
No, we have one pro package, one Zoom pro package for the district, and we just share the password, like the email and password, so that we can sign on. I can sign on and I can set up a meeting.
Yeah. So that's for the district staff. So if each club purchased one, and then they can grant access to the club members to set up meetings.
Okay, because I haven't seen that feature on Zoom, but perhaps I'll find it.
I'll use it later. I don't think they publicize it, but you can, as long as somebody's got the login details.
I was looking to shut off the recording, but typically if you have one pro package for a Rotary Club, then that's good enough.
Okay.
Irene, sign into Zoom through the website, and then go into your package, and there's a series of buttons, what they're called account management and host management, and you'd be able to add various players in as multiple hosts.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'm going to ask Jim if you could give us an overview of just first off the process for tonight in regards to working with Zoom, and then recognizing we're just after 7 o'clock, we're going to start the meeting here now. So Jim, if you don't mind providing us with your short overview.
Sure. Welcome everybody to tonight's Zoom meeting led by our District Governor Tracy Favrick. I think everybody's starting to get a little bit more used to Zoom nowadays, but if you can rename yourself, put your name in, and then put your Rotary Club where you're from, we will communicate in the chat box so we don't disturb any speakers. And when we start, actually right now, if everybody can mute themselves, that would be the best bet, because there's a lot of background noise that goes on. So if you have a question or comment, put it in the chat box and I'll monitor the chat box and relay it on to Tracy. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, District Governor-elect Jim. I'm not sure how come I'm echoing Jim. Can you hear that? Is it cleaned up, Jim? Jim, how is that now?
Good.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone. And thank you again, Jim, for providing that overview. You know, as Jim mentioned, we're all getting accustomed and very familiar with the new online platform of connecting and sharing. And I want to recognize all the wonderful Rotarians from our district of 3 provinces and 2 territories who have joined us tonight. You are the heart of community, and we really appreciate you, and we appreciate that you've given us this next hour together. Tonight's meeting is really around informing you and talking further around the insurance coverage that we have at the district, and to also talk about risk management. So we're very excited to travel this journey with you tonight, to have some conversations, and we really appreciate you're able to join us. As you can see, we're connecting in the new way. We're connecting through the online platform. This was a session that was going to be offered at the Spring Learning Assembly. And, you know, very disheartedly, we had to cancel the assembly due to the pandemic and the challenges that we're all facing. So we appreciate your extra time tonight to be able to come on board and to share and to learn. And I recognize that we're also at the cusp of starting a long weekend. So thank you so much for that. I am honored tonight to introduce you to Rob Lemire. Now, Rob is joining us from Kamloops. Rob is joining us from the company of Wilson Beck Insurance, pardon me. Wilson Beck Insurance is the broker for 5370 insurance policy, and Rob is going to be here first off to answer some questions that have been provided to him in advance, and he's going to also provide us with some information around the vulnerable checks, and then he's going to move into the risk management of understanding our risks, but moving from the gray perspective to a black and white where things are clear for you. I've been honored to work with Rob over the last, met Rob about just under a year ago, and highly respect him as a professional and appreciate his knowledge and his expertise in the industry. Rob has also is a fellow Rotarian, and he works with a variety of other districts in ensuring, or pardon me, in the coverage of their policies and their systems for their district as well. So you have all received information prior to this meeting. You'll see on where I'm sharing my screen at this time this is the back end side of our Club Runner page, where all the documentation from Rob has been posted. And as you sign into Club Runner with your ID, and when you go to the district page, you can access this information. And so this is an area for you. This is for you as clubs, where you can access all the important documents and resources and have them at your fingertips. As Jim had mentioned, we will work through questions on the latter part of the meeting as they come forward, because we do want to ensure that Rob has the time to review all the great things that he has to share with us. And truly, as we know, right, even at this current time of the pandemic, risk management is a key important piece for us to be strong and to be steady to move forward. So Rob, I am going to turn my screen off, and anyone that would like to see where Rob is, if you go to your gallery, and actually Jim, you may want to correct me on this, in the gallery you'll actually be able to see Rob as he's speaking. You can change the little controls there. So to get started, as I say, I'm just going to stop sharing, and go to speaker's view in your gallery, and then you'll be able to see Rob. So Jim, if you can unmute Rob for us, please. And Rob, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's an honor to have you join District 5370.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time. Here we have quite the crowd, so that is fantastic and exactly what we were hoping to get to share share some information. I'd like to start off just by saying Wilson Beck Insurance is very proud to be the provider of insurance for now 4 insurance districts going on 5, and really proud of the work that we've done for us. And as a Rotarian, I'm even more proud. So just what we're going to do, I think Tracy and Jim kind of touched on it. I'm going to go ahead and give you a bit of an overview. I don't want to talk too much at the very beginning because I know from past experience that we're going to have several questions, and that's what I'm here for, is to answer many questions. So I'll try not to be too long-winded, but just kind of be to the point and make the best of all of your time. So first of all, a little bit about Wilson Beck Insurance and myself. We did send the company profile around. I myself have concentrated on not-for-profits for about 13 or 14 years when I first wrote our local YMCA here and realized that there weren't a lot of players in the not-for-profit sector as far as insurance goes. And even as far as wordings, the wordings even 12 to 15 years ago weren't ideal. Abuse has changed, bylaws have changed, litigation has changed, and so it just seemed like an area that needed attention. You know, my dad was a Rotarian. I've been involved in not-for-profits since I was a kid, and yeah, it needed some attention. So I've been concentrating on that for about 15 years. Yeah, between 12 and 15. And at the end of the day, joined Wilson Beck as a partner 3 years ago, and I brought in the more of the not-for-profit expertise at that level because the rest of our organization is largely construction. But yeah, so Wilson Beck and I, we have about 120 employees. We are licensed almost across Canada. There are a couple of provinces we are not. But however, we are kind of here, there, and everywhere. Our offices are in BC and Alberta so far, and growing east. Now, how this all came to be, basically, as a Rotarian, I was asked to do a presentation on our current insurance. So I'm a member of District 5060 in Kamloops Rotary West, and our district insurance representative wasn't available to do a presentation. So I was asked to do a presentation at the district level. And to be completely frank, once I got looking at all of our coverages and many of the assumptions that were made and some coverages that were missing, I was very concerned, and so concerned that if we didn't fix it, I would have hesitated to partake in some of our events because of that concern was so dire. So what I did is I volunteered. I think it was about 8 months of just review and analysis. We actually dug into as many insurance policies we could get into across Canada, because many of our policy documents actually weren't secure in districts across Canada. And I found that there was 3 pretty big factors. One was that the abuse liability wasn't up to snuff, in my opinion. You know, there are differences in wordings, and they're very important. So the abuse wording was one of my concerns. Almost none of us had cyber liability, which in this day and age, well, in the last 2-3 years, all you have to do is turn on the news and realize that none of us are really immune to this. And so we found some cyber coverage. And basically, we did talk to district governors across Canada and asked for the go-ahead to do research on this. So we were given that research. And the reason we asked is because what we needed to do was talk to a broker who could go and canvass the entire market without bumping into each other and ultimately come up with the best coverage and best options for our Rotarians. So the level of concern is, I want to just reiterate that it's not for necessarily just for us as Rotarians, but it's for our volunteers who come along and help us out. It's for the members of the public, and the kids, the youth that we're involved with. That's a huge aspect. And then, but bringing it back to us, I mean, we're all doing great things for our communities, but we don't necessarily realize that when we sit on boards of directors and when we plan events and we do these things, that if the right coverage isn't there, and even though we think it is, we could end up personally financially liable. So literally, it's our personal retirement plans, it's our families, it's etc. So this is so incredibly important. And what I found is that there'd actually been not a lot of conversation around insurance at many district levels for about 10 years. Now, there are the exceptions by all means, but something was created about 15 years ago, and it was good for 15 years ago, but it hadn't improved. It hadn't gone any further. And this is no slight to anyone. It's a huge project. It's and everybody who created the previous one did a great job. It just needed revamping. And in fact, there are, there's areas for improvement on all of them. There's area improvement for ours. Nothing is perfect, but the districts that we've been dealing with typically want to improve our risk management. So that's really where this came from. And what we're trying to do is increase our level of risk management as Rotarians at every level when it comes to events, getting separate policies where we didn't before, but because maybe it was unclear, or and that's a matter of perspective, which we'll get into, but also it's just a good idea. You know, at the end of the day, we carry $5 million liability for one loss and $10 million liability for up to 2 losses in a year. And we throw some pretty big events. So it wouldn't take long at all for that to get heated up in these days. So I'll just touch on, I'm going to try really hard not to talk too much. I'm being mindful of the clock here. And so I'm just going to bring up the high level overview. So again, we have $5 million liability for any one loss. We now have $2 million liability, which is abuse liability. And it is with Northbridge, who has one of the top abuse liability wordings in the industry. Many abuse liability policies exclude harassment and bullying, and it's only sexual molestation, or it actually refers to in other wordings that it's only intentional acts. And in today's age, it's pretty, I think it goes without being said that there can be a claim, there can be a loss, there can be an accusation when something was completely unintentional, and it could be unintentional for years. So that is where this abuse liability is better. It has a better wordings, and it is one of the top ones out there. Directors and officers liability. I'll refer to one of the questions that we get often, is this directors and officers liability actually extends to all clubs, all trusts, all foundations, all and those types of affiliated committees, and the board of directors associated with them. So the breadth of the directors and officers coverage is very wide. And we've had people double check with us, and we've double checked with the insurance company, and we do have that in writing, and so that's great. I talked about this cyber liability. You know, we have Club Runner. Initially, I looked at Club Runner's liability, our agreements with them, and unfortunately, they limit their liability to us by the amount that we pay them every month or every year, which is not a heck of a lot. Now, we carry anywhere, so each district could carry anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 members worth of names, husbands and wives names, kids names, birthdays are in there. This is just it's a jackpot if somebody ever jumped in for identity theft. So it would not take much at all. And there has been, it was actually in Alaska. I was on a call for Alaska just to give some advice. And it happened in Alaska on some cyber losses. So it's not unheard of, and we really needed it. To be honest, I want these limits to be higher as the days go by and as we get more districts on board. But this is much better than where we were. We have $100,000 miscellaneous property, which they've agreed is just a blanket coverage to cover miscellaneous property we have, whether it be regalia. It doesn't extend to cover buildings. Most, you guys have one club within your district that we have a separate little building policy on to cover their buildings that they still own and didn't just put money to. But this is, yeah, a better example of this is if we have, you know, just before a district conference, the swag that we buy is worth, oh, it gets up there, easily $10,000 when you have enough backpacks and things like that for 300 some odd members. So if there's a fire or a major theft, that's going to be covered. Crime coverage, we have $30,000 in crime coverage. Now, just to let you know, what we've discovered is that directors and officers liability and claims and crime claims are the most prevalent across Canada and most likely to happen. So one day I'd like to get that crime coverage up to 50 or 100,000, but for now we're trying to be very competitive in our pricing and going from there. There is legal assist coverage, which is a hotline for any directors that may want to call if they have any questions or concerns. So they are able to call that hotline at any time. It's basically a free lawyer, free lawyer advice. They're not going to write letters and such for us, but very handy to have on there, and just something to make note of. And all the contact information is on the policy documents that I gave you. And then the last real kind of highlight as to what we've improved is we've added an accidental death and dismemberment package, which extends to our Rotarians as up to 80 years old, as well as our volunteers. So that is something that if somebody were volunteering for us and they were hurt or worst case scenario killed, we have an accident policy in place, which would automatically pay their family $75,000 in the event of a death, which is just, you know, we feel that it's a pretty good added value for, I think what that ends up being is less than $1 per member per year. Yeah, so so I think I'll just go to my questions that were sent to me earlier this week from one of you guys. So you bear with me, I'll just open that email here. Oops, wrong one. And so, so the first question, I'll just read it out loud. Whether or not party and liquor insurance is covered, or if that is a separate policy, and how do clubs go about putting this in place if it is a separate policy? So the answer is this policy covers 90+% of the events that we run, dinners, dances. I did attach to the, I did attach what is specifically excluded. Those are the ones that we need to let us know about and get a separate liability policy for. But are everything from firesides to dinners and dances to rubber ducky races to conferences, etc., are all covered under this policy. The things that are not are essentially heavily focused, alcohol-focused events, which is mostly if it's a liquor tasting or if it's a wine tasting. We have our Iron Somm here where we like to brag about how much wine we pour. So we get a separate liability policy for that. And then the only difference here is, so then there's parades, fairs and festivals. Now, festival doesn't mean you guys have a music festival, which is done, one of your clubs has it throughout town where there's youth singing at different churches and halls, and that's covered. Or you have a piano festival, and that type of thing is going to be covered. But it's the 3-day festivals. So a 3-day festival, such as a Rib Fest, such as a 3-day music festival where you're bringing in country artists and you have, you have 50 to 100,000 people there at the end of the day. Now, I'll jump in there on the rib fest because the rib fests are a contentious issue with some of the clubs. We've had 3 big complaints, I'd say. And the problem is we've laid under this assumption that it's covered. And for the last, it's a little too scary. And I'm not going to lie, myself and other insurance brokers disagree about this. And I'm okay with that. I have chosen to take a conservative approach to this to make sure that we are 100% covered. A lot of brokers will say, or people will say, if it's not excluded, it's covered. That scares the bejesus out of me. Now, the reason I say that is because I talked to somebody in Ontario who assumed that a rib fest with 200,000 people in attendance believed that this should be covered. Now, if I were to tell you what an event company who insures events alone would charge for that, it would probably be in the range of $50,000 to $75,000 for that'd be a large music. No, that's a little high. But at the end of the day, call it. I did a music festival. It was over $20,000 for a 3-day music festival. So to assume that that's automatically covered in a policy that we pay $40,000 for is just dangerous. So that's so that's our perspective that we're taking. We'd rather be safe than sorry, and so there are events that aren't covered here where there may have been, or it was perceived to be, or or could have been covered on the previous one. But our strong recommendation is just to get a separate policy and protect our people the best we possibly can. You did ask me to touch on vulnerable checks. We've sent a note off because to the insurance company, I haven't heard back because I believe in Alberta, the vulnerable sector checks can't be done online. Therefore, with the COVID situation, we are not able to get some renewed. I don't believe this is going to be a problem in any way, shape, or form. We've advised the company. It's very similar to an alarm system not working, and we just got to tell them that it's not working at the moment, and we're going to have them back as soon as we possibly can. So I don't think that's going to be an issue.
So just in regards to that, I'll just expand just for a moment there, Rob. We know that with the detachments closed, that we have some concern that there are some, and that the board of directors had a discussion. Sorry, it looks like my internet. Oh, there we go. The board of directors had a discussion and evaluated the risk, and that any vulnerable checks that expire from March 1st till September, or after March 1st, are extended and for 6 months. And so we've made that request to the insurance companies, what Rob is referring to. So recognizing that you cannot right now access a renewal on your vulnerable checks, we wanted to ensure that those that have them that expire after March 1st understand that they do have an extension that we've granted as long as the insurance company approves it. And as Rob's indicated, he believes we should be good to go. So I've got some questions that are coming up. Jim, Jim, do you mind if we go through a couple of questions here that you've got on the side, Jim?
Sure. So I have one from Ehor Kruk. Noted in documents that now requirement for people serving food to have food certificates. Does this apply to our volunteers serving and making pancakes at a school breakfast program? And is the hotline for district officers or any club officers as well?
Yes. Yep. The hotline would be fine for anybody to call, really. As long as they're a director or an officer. And back to the food safe, it's actually not a requirement under the insurance policy. It's more of a recommendation. So all we did was create a document to say, hey, here's a really good checklist to reduce our exposure. And especially when you're hiring people or somebody who's actually cooking, it's the cooking and the preparing of food. I volunteered our breakfast program, and no, it's not a requirement, and I don't think you need to worry about that at all.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Jim. You're on mute, Jim.
The next question is from Victoria Ewert, and is errors and emissions coverage, does it need to be included in our policy?
It does not. We have talked to the company about it. At the end of the day, errors and emissions is in the event is for people that are giving advice. It is designed largely for doctors, lawyers, insurance guys, accountants, consultants, counselors, etc. So at the end of the day, we are not charging a fee for service for advice, and therefore we don't have an exposure for errors and emissions. Now, this being said, if a director makes a mistake, makes a decision to the best of their ability, and yet is accused of making a poor decision that financially affected somebody or personally affected somebody, that is going to be covered under the directors and officers policy.
Super, thanks, Rob. The next question's from Celestino in Yellowknife. If our volunteers participate directly with COVID-19 projects put on by the club, are they covered if they get ill and need medical attention outside of territorial government coverage?
So the insurance in COVID is a very, I will say what everybody's saying, we're in unprecedented times. The insurance world has not seen this either. We saw a little bit of with SARS, but nothing to this extent. Essentially, has not been confirmed that insurance will respond to losses when it comes to COVID. It is highly unlikely that it will be, because insurance was not designed for pandemics. I'll go a little bit further into this just because it's a very interesting stat. It is said that business interruption or losses just from business interruption in the United States is going to be approximately between $300 and $383 billion a month. So essentially, the insurance world industry would not exist if this was all covered by insurance. There's not enough money in the insurance coffers to cover this pandemic. Now, that's a very interesting question on our volunteer coverage. I have not been asked that, and I can look into that as to whether or not, but no, because that's an accident policy. So it had to be an accident. No, so there won't be coverage under that. Sorry, just thinking out loud. But likely the answer is no, because not to say that we wouldn't report the claim and try to find a loophole, but at the end of the day, not designed for that. Therefore, no.
Okay, thanks, Rob. From Victoria Ewert, how about coverage for travel to RI convention outside Canada? Travel insurance is getting expensive to get nowadays.
Yeah, the travel insurance is required. Everybody needs to buy their own travel insurance. Our policy on the accidental death and dismemberment is for within Canada. Therefore, no, everybody still needs to get their travel insurance coverage on their own.
And from John Nickel in Edmonton Northeast, did I understand that party and liquor events are excluded and require a separate policy?
No, most of them are going to be covered. And so what we have is most of them are going to be covered. If we're having a dinner and a dance, if we have lobster fests, we have Oktoberfests, and so the Oktoberfest is one we will ask more questions on just to confirm. We've had every angle of Oktoberfest. One is a ton of alcohol, drinking from 5 until midnight. That one is not covered, and we get a separate liability policy for. Then we had another Oktoberfest that was sausages and expecting to have three drinks each and done by 10. That one was covered. So most events will be covered. So our ask is that when you're throwing an event, to complete the fillable event application, the certificate insurance request form, and that will trigger us to let you know whether or not there is a special events liability policy required.
Super, thanks, Rob. I have a question from Irene from Edmonton. With COVID-19 highest infection rate to occur yet, how are our inbound students covered? They get seriously ill as there are a few that haven't returned home.
So
the
they're going.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the inbound students, how are they covered?
So it is a requirement of our students to get their own travel insurance and their travel medical insurance. So that is where they're going to have that coverage.
And from John Nickel, are we to let you know of every event that we operate prior to operating, even if they are not excluded?
We would prefer to err on the side of caution. What we've signed up for here is to be your risk managers and your risk advisors. So, and I'm not going to lie, initially some Rotarians are like, well, this is tedious. But by the time we have a conversation with myself or Ann, for the most part, everybody's saying thank you for the extra information. We're glad we double checked. And so now by all means, do just, if it's, I mean, the certificate request information is the best. We would rather see more than less, just to be 100% on the safe side. But every event, I mean, if you're going to your weekly meetings, no, we don't need to know that. Your regular dinner and dance, or your firesides, we don't need to know those. If you're just going to volunteer, your pit stops, we don't need to know those. Your seniors, you're stopping in to help seniors, don't need to know those. It's more of the fundraisers that are a little bit, a little bit more alcohol involved, or there's a vendor involved, or there's a venue involved that requires insurance. Those are the ones that are kind of the triggers. But yeah, we don't need to know pit stops. We don't need to know feeding the homeless or the kids programs, etc.
Super, thanks, Rob. From Julius Buskey from the Rotary Club of St. Albert, St. City. Are volunteers in other countries on international projects covered? I think I know the answer on that one.
Yeah, so the way the wording is on both this one and the last liability policy we had is any suits would have to be brought to Canada to be covered. So we have had a ton of conversation around this. We are working on getting a worldwide coverage. I'm not going to make any promises because it's a lot of work and we've had a lot of no's. But our hope is to one day have full worldwide coverage. The discussion at several district levels are, well, number one, we weren't covered for this before. We are a grassroots organization that's been doing this for over 100 years old, before liability was even really a thing. And if we were going to a third world country, we didn't worry about the chance of getting into trouble for doing it. And that's basically the perspective on that, that we're going to continue to do things even though we're not necessarily covered. And I'm not going to lie, I'm the bad guy that's been bringing a lot of things to light that people haven't talked about. But it's better, that's why this presentation is called Out of the Gray and Into the Black and White, because I want Rotarians to know what they're covered for. And it doesn't mean we stop doing certain things. It just means, hey, just be aware. And if you're risk adverse and you're not the type of person that wants to go there unless you're 1000% you're covered, then it's just not, that's not the project for you. Whereas if you want to keep doing it, by all means, go do it. So technically no coverage in other countries if somebody was to get hurt over there.
And so you'd be looking for coverage from the actual Rotary Club in that country, right?
Yes, so we made a recommendation to get proof of insurance as long as it's not a third world country. I mean, if you're going to England for a project somewhere in Europe, you should be able to request from your local Rotary Club who is hosting that their policy extends to volunteers while on the ground, which hopefully they do.
And the other piece as well, Rob, is encouraging for everyone to have travel insurance as well when they are venturing out of Canada and working on projects in other communities, if it's Belize, Mexico, England, etc.
Yes,
So
and we're
go ahead, Rob.
sorry, and we're working on our ultimate goal is over the next year is to create more criteria. I know Rotary's good at it, but we can get better on the risk management before we go to certain projects. That it's like, hey, here's the list of things that we need to do to make sure that we're doing. And to be honest, 5370 has great systems in place, especially with their vulnerable checks. I commend you guys. But I mean, we all could do a little bit better. So we're just trying to do that.
Thanks, Rob. Question from Ehor. What effect does the provincial health and safety legislation risk assessment and training in advance work? If it's omitted, does it mean insurance is invalidated?
Could you give that one to me again?
Okay, what effect does the provincial health and safety legislation regarding risk assessment and training in advance work, if it's omitted, does it mean insurance is invalidated?
Okay, yes, I did get an email on this about a month and a half ago, and I read the legislation, and that legislation is, in a nutshell, here's my perspective on it. It basically said do everything you can to protect people, have checklists, have risk management things in place. If you're having a big event, try to create a plan. Now, if you don't follow those, it will not void the insurance. You made a mistake. Negligence is covered under commercial general liability policy, and poor decisions are made at the director level are covered under insurance. So it will not null and void the coverage unless you knowingly did an act that was completely blatantly and borderline criminal. That would be the only time that it would be excluded. So I read that document. I would not concern myself with you. It's a great document to go through and a great checklist and to work with. But yes. And whoever said Jason doesn't blink is right. I think it's a picture, and I've been wondering about that.
He's just staring us down.
Keeping us on our toes.
So great. From Victoria, how about theft coverage? In the past, a club treasurer went AWOL and took the money of the club. So theft coverage?
Yes, that's the crime coverage. So we have $30,000 in crime coverage. And yeah, so no, that is coverage up to $30,000. I mean, if we ended up having 2 or 3 claims, we by a district basis, we might have a hard time getting that in the past or in the future. So, and on our application, what we did is we had other things countersigned. And I think this is another thing that Tracy and I did talk about and kind of got pushed to the backside after COVID came in. But we did talk about crime, didn't we? I'm just going to make a note on that. Because we could be better, especially on our larger events. It's good. We should implement risk management things by, hey, every time you're up to $1,000 in cash, spread the cash around, give it to 3 committee members instead of 1 committee member having $3,000 to $5,000, or having countersigning, or giving one person all the control over the cash. We are incredibly trusting, but we need to still be careful.
And also from Victoria, but how about kidnap and ransom for members who go to third world countries?
Kidnap and ransom can be purchased. So we were trying to keep this affordable. And at the end of the day, we didn't include it in the package. So there's no coverage. It can be bought. It would be a tough one to underwrite and charge for. And when that's the case, insurance companies charge a lot because we have such a plethora of people. We don't actually know who's going to go traveling next year. Those kidnap and ransom policies are a little bit easier to get when we have a little more structure and know who's going when and how often. So the answer is no, and maybe one day.
Thanks, Rob. And from Deborah Jack, do we need to ensure that every club member has a VPRC, or just those that are volunteering with, excuse me, vulnerable persons? No,
vulnerable.
I'm not sure if that's an insurance question.
Well, what we told the insurance company is that anybody who's going to spend time alone with a youth, or well, youth, you guys go further and say with senior or vulnerable people, but that anybody's going to be alone will have a vulnerable sector check. So volunteer, I would caution very hard against letting just a volunteer drive one of your youth somewhere with no vulnerable sector check, or yeah, I would caution against that.
And I thought we answered this question, but from Jason, I noted an exclusion for sporting events. Does this include charity golf tournaments?
Not golf tournaments. I'm arguing with the insurance company right now on the Bonspiel. I paid for the Bonspiel myself because I didn't agree with them. They wanted to charge $250. So golf tournaments were fine. And I'm still arguing with the insurance company on Bonspiels. But if you throw any Bonspiels in the next 3 months before I get this figured out, I will pay for the insurance on the Bonspiel.
Thank you for covering and supporting the District 536070 bond bill that had taken place before all of this happened, Rob. I know that was some, just uncertainty about what to do with that one. I really appreciate how you supported us. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
From John Nickel, please explain further the insurance coverage for rental cars, i.e. the DG's lease car during his or her term.
Long-term leases, there is no coverage for long-term leases under commercial policy or not-for-profit policy. There is non-owned automobile liability under this policy, which means if somebody is driving as a volunteer and their insurance is wrong, maybe it's not designed for what it was being used for, and the Rotarian and Rotary or at the club or the district gets sued, there is non-owned auto liability covered. However, that only covers vehicles, as far as rented or leased, it only covers vehicles that are rented or leased for up to 30 days. And so there's a matter of, we've had some questions on shuttle service. Now, we did insure a red nose operation. And the reason we were able to do that is because of their very good policies in place. A, double checking that everybody has the right insurance. B, the policy that everybody signs off saying that they will not drink anytime that day. C, that they will sign off. They understand that if they are tired or tired, just not feeling up to the task, that they can quit at any time. So if you're looking to do shuttling on a regular basis, we're going to want to implement a checklist on that, and we're going to want to let the company know. So I did get a call on that last week, and we did the red nose there before Christmas.
And the last question I have, does the insurance cover new members or volunteers from day one? If not,
Yes.
What is the criteria or qualification to be part of the coverage?
There's no qualification or criteria. Volunteers are automatically covered under the wordings. So if a volunteer just shows up once to help out and is not listed anywhere, they are covered under the volunteer accidental death and dismemberment, as well as the general liability. And I'm just going to go through my list. They want to make sure I got all mine as well.
Okay. Are we free to pass your business card around to other NPOs?
Oh, yeah, by all means. We've been doing that already. And I've had two, one current and one past insurance person who has said that they'd like to see this go across to the Lions clubs and Kiwanis and such. So an NPO is a not-for-profit organization. Somebody just asked.
Wonderful.
Well, super. Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate you answering all the questions that were put up. Another one just came up from Irene. Inbound students, does a family need extra insurance as they transport the student daily?
I would recommend that you have your liability at 5 million. If you don't, I'd actually recommend that for everybody out there these days. So yeah, I would do that. I run mine at 5. That's a great idea.
Super. Thanks again, Tracy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim. And I do see Connie's also added a question around, will this, is this session being recorded? Yes, it is. And it will be shared on the insurance page of the Club Runner site of our district page. So where you've accessed all the resources, you'll be able to access a recording of this too as well. So thank you so much for the question on that. As well, I will just share, another ask is to share the page. So I'm just going to bring up the page from the district here, just so that you can see the information in regards. This is what it looks like behind the scenes. So when you enter into the District 5370 Club Runner page, when you enter in your ID and your password, this is the page that you come to. And so as you can see, there is the information around Wilson Beck, Rob's direct line, also as well, and both are tremendous to work with. We do encourage you to use the rotary@wmbeck.com when you are connecting, and that way they ensure that they can monitor your requests from a Rotary perspective. Rob, you've gone over a lot tonight. We have a few more minutes here left of our call. Do you have some more that you wish to cover?
You know, at the end of the day, I just want to reiterate that we do consider this an absolute honor. Our goal is to make this better. Everything can always be better. And we're not going to stop working really hard at this. We are actually going back to insurance companies again this year just to make sure this is the best that we can get. And we know it's a long road, and making it better down all the way down. And we're going to keep on trucking. We're gonna make it so that Rotarians across Canada have the best coverage they can possibly get.
Mm-hmm. And Rob, I thank you for that. When we did our investigation and our analysis as a district on the insurance coverage and our needs, you were very attentive and provided us clear direction, and I really appreciate that. You've helped to guide us, and we need your expertise, and you can, as everyone can see here today, Rob is available for us. So Rob, thank you so much. Do we have any other questions, Jim, before we get ready to sign off? I can't see any of the questions right now with my screen showing.
No, I think that's it.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank everyone for your time tonight. Again, we recognize we're at the start of the long weekend, Easter weekend, and you've taken time to be with us this evening. Please ensure that your directors from your clubs also are aware where to go and access this information. It is your information. It is yours available for you, and we will continue to update it as we have material from Rob as well. So your questions help us. As you ask the questions and we analyze and evaluate, we can continue to add more details there for you. So please keep those questions coming to either myself or Jim or Rob directly, because that's what we're here for, to help you with it. So as we close tonight, I want to say thank you again. Thank you so much for being on board tonight, for your very valuable questions, for your leadership within your Rotary clubs in your community. As we leave tonight, I ask each of you to stay safe, keep your family safe. Know that we do need to be isolated and not connecting with our families this weekend personally by physical contact, face-to-face, but we can do it through online events like this, through Zoom, FaceTime, etc. So please take time to spend some special time with your family in the best way you can. Keep your club safe, keep yourself safe, and thank you for what you're doing for your communities. We're in an interesting time right now, and we're all venturing through it together. And so many of you have heard me say before, we are better together, and I'm honored that we're all in this together. So thank you for who you are, and as you go forward, please stay well. All the best.